So hi everyone, welcome to this WMCRU session where we are focusing on access and specifically around some of the learning from our Access Champions programme. And we had started this discussion back in February just to kind of, talk about access and what we meant by it. I think we had some really good discussions. And this is about starting to sort of bring together some of the resources that came through that programme. I'll show you a little video in a minute around the Access Champion programme, just so you can get a flavour of what happened and where it came from. But this came out of a regional project that Culture Central were kind of lead on and working on something called Volunteering Futures. So that was a DCMS Arts Council funded programme to get more people into volunteering in the arts and cultural sector. So we were one of a number across the country, and we worked specifically in Stoke on Trent, in North Staffordshire, Black Country, and in Birmingham, North and East Birmingham quite specifically. And we had partners that were Stoke Creates, which is a cultural compact in Stoke-on-Trent. We had Creative Black Country, which is a creative people and places organisation in the Black Country. And we worked with Birmingham Museums Trust and the Birmingham Base. Then we also wanted to have quite a specific piece of work around access and inclusion for volunteers. And that's where partners were Richard and Open Theatre. And also we brought in partners from Deaf Explorer and Frontline Dance as well. So the programme ran over 2 years. I mean, I think there's lots of learning and reflections. We're going to be sharing some of the evaluations shortly, just in terms of how long it takes, I think, to really support volunteers properly into the sector, and for us to understand how long that takes, especially those who've traditionally been excluded or face barriers to volunteering. So lots of learning from that, and a bit of a shame that it was only sort of 2 years really. But if anybody wants to know more about that, then please let us know. But if I'm going to show you just a little bit of the video. So one of the parts of that we said we'd do would be a sort of a training programme for people in the cultural sector. And it emerged that really access was that kind of key priority. And we thought we'd actually be able to hone a group of people, I suppose, across the region who were really kind of skilled, equipped, or able to talk about and share their ideas and learning around access. So here is a little bit of the film. Give me 1 second, make sure audio is in the right place as well.
Nope. Can't it?
It's not playing the audio out, I don't think.
It's not playing the audio out?
No, we can't hear.
Oh, okay. Where's that? Give me 2 seconds. Sorry, I thought I pressed that button. I'll stop sharing 1 second. Oh God. There we go.
Open Theatre's been going for about 30 years. We're based in the West Midlands, and we work with young people with learning disabilities. We were asked by Culture Central to lead on the access side of the volunteer programme. The Access Champion scheme is basically about getting a group of interested people together from various arts organisations across the West Midlands to look at how we can together develop a far better sense of what access looks like for volunteers in those organisations.
It's a chance for us to look at access needs, but in the context of volunteering, which I think is often missed out.
We meet once a month and with like-minded people who want to do better access. So the Access Champion scheme is about helping volunteering become more accessible to people.
And it's also about understanding that not one size fits all.
We have a certain amount of expertise that we can bring to that, but we're also bringing in a lot of other people with expertise in different areas of disability in order to make sure the process is as wide-reaching and all-encompassing as possible.
I've been on a journey with my own access needs, and it's really great to hear about other people's experiences.
How can we make the venue or the museum or wherever it is that we're coming from more accessible and more comfortable for the people who interact with us? About a third of my volunteers currently have additional access needs, and I wanted to equip myself with the tools to do the best that I could for them to make sure they're getting a good experience.
So for us, access isn't simply about inclusion into something that already exists. It's about changing things in order to become more accessible.
It's been really useful to hear from people who have been doing this for a really long time. So it's really good to get their advice on real life scenarios and to understand specific situations and how to handle them better. So what I've taken away from the course so far is that access is multifaceted. There's a broad range of different things. There is no one size fits all when it comes to access.
I would hope that people that will take away from the work we're doing with the Access Champions a sense that they can make a difference, that they can work things out for themselves.
I think that access is fundamentally it needs to be embedded in all organisations, especially in culture. You're trying to offer something out to the people, to your communities, and so what you need to offer has got to be representative of those communities.
I work in a heritage space, and there's so many barriers there with access and inclusion. And so it's really important to keep having these discussions. What's worked for people? What difficulties have they faced along the way?
I think access is important to cultural organisations as a whole, because to not have access is excluding a large proportion of your audience and visitors as well as volunteers.
Cultural organisations can be a huge part of anybody's life in terms of enhancing and fulfilling a sense of personal satisfaction, and everybody is entitled to that.
Culture Centre itself is a networking organisation, and I think some of those organisations are developing relationships with each other through all this. So there's an incredible long-term legacy for the project on that level, that we've all made new partnerships, new friendships, new relationships through this that will sustain beyond the life of this project.
That's a great video, Richard and team at Open Theatre. So thanks very much. I'm going to just hand over to you guys now, if that's okay, to sort of talk about some of the results and some of the resources that have come out of the programme.
Richard,
I think you're on mute, Richard.
That's good. Am I better now? Can you hear me? As you can see, we did have a lot of fun during these sessions as well. And just to be clear, the group that you saw me working with is a group of young people who work on a Friday and create performances and so on. And some of the ways we work, we try to work with the Access Champions as well. Just to be clear from the start that and it was said in the video, we are not experts. We have not set ourselves up as the experts. We welcomed being part of this to facilitate a process, not to lead it in that sense. And it was really important that we brought together such a huge range of people from across the country with lived experience of disability to inform the way we worked. I think just echoing a couple of things that Erica said, it was a 2-year project and it should have been a 5-year project at least, that we want to carry on doing this work because we're discovering things as we go along, and we've built these relationships and we're trying to find ways of carrying on working with people because access is such a collaborative process. It's not, nobody can do it all on their own. So we're looking at how we can carry on doing that work in the future. It was an experiment, it was an adventure, it was trying things out and seeing what worked and what didn't work. And very much it was about being very specific about, let's look at this particular group of people and focus on how we develop access for them. It wasn't a broad brushstroke. It was the kind of learning was based on individual projects and individual experiences. And then lastly, what we didn't know, but we have decided to do, was create, I think language is very interesting, and the word access itself, you go, what does that mean, access? Who are we talking about? And the implicit assumption is that access and disability go hand in hand, but access, of course, can be for anybody who's not part of something. The focus is on disability. Our experience is learning disability, and it's just part of this multifaceted picture. So we thought we'd create a resource pack, and then you go, what's a resource pack? Is it just simply a toolbox so that people can go and look at it and go, oh, I can do it now? Or do we need something a little more interactive, a little more alive, a little more ongoing, so it can be adapted and developed as time goes on? So we've veered away from calling it a resource pack because we don't want to create a toolkit, a tick box thing. So Liz and Grace and I worked together for the 2 years on this project. Liz will tell you a little bit about herself, I think, before we go, and then Grace will tell you about herself. Sorry, if you don't know, I'm director of Open Theatre, and we work with young people with learning disabilities. And we're going to just share with you the I can't even remember what we're calling it now, Liz.
Opening up access.
Opening up access, that's it. The opening up access pack with you. It's still not quite finished. We're still putting it together, but it will give you some ideas. And also what we want to do is carry on working with other people as much as possible to share this. It's not, here it is, hand it over, you can go off and do it. We want to look at ways of working together in the future. The partnership and the collaborations that have developed over this period have been crucial. So I'm going to hand over to Liz to just introduce the resource, not the resource pack, the opening up access.
Yes, this is not the resource pack, but we actually called it it's opening up because it is the beginning of looking at something, and that's the whole idea. It's carrying on delving and getting involved in it. It made me laugh in that video, just to introduce myself. It said, I can't remember, Rosie said, somebody said, and here is somebody who's been doing this for a long time, and they showed me, like, mother, grandma of access. So I'm Liz Leck, and I've worked in theatre for many years at the Belgrade and at Birmingham Hippodrome, and introduced all the access in facilities and ideas, and hopefully Birmingham Hippodrome have been continuing their access work, which is brilliant now. And I worked with Richard for many a long time, and this is a really important thing that we were actually doing, and I think it's because what we were doing is this group of people who came to meet us, and we met them. I think it was 6 sessions we had. And each session, the first session we met was just like finding out what they wanted to know, because again, what Richard was saying, we're not the experts, but what we wanted to do was try and find out the best way to inform and help and direct, but sort of like help people find things for themselves. And it's not a definitive piece of work. It's not finished, it's ongoing. Things happen all the time. Communication changes. AI is going to have a huge effect on how we look at sort of communication in the future. So there's lots of different things to do. But what we wanted to do was just try and pull together things that we do know. It's a bit like that, we know what we know, and we know what we don't know, and we don't know what we don't know, sort of thing. So there's lots of it there. But what we're going to do is just show you briefly, if Grace can bring it up. This is we're sort of like what we've opened up so far, and discussions that are going, and resources. And we've created Grace has been amazing. She's like a ferret. She finds things, and it's like we've got lots of different links and resources and ideas, so that you can sort of look at. So this is, we're calling this resources to stimulate and help shape your practice, whether you're an individual artist or a huge venue. Hopefully in this ongoing document, you will find information that can help you. If we can scroll up, Grace, that'd be amazing. So part of the, well, obviously we'll
sorry, yeah. Can we just make it a little bit bigger?
Okay.
Yes, I can zoom in. I don't know how to make it so that you can see the whole thing with it being bigger, if that makes sense. So is it any better at the moment?
I love the fact that it's accessible and we can't read it.
Zoom.
Okay, so just to say how with the very first sort of session we've sort of put in there is all about looking at the social model of disability. And this is obviously something I'm sure most of you will know about. It's about that we're looking at how society can help the individual, how to break barriers down, as opposed to the medical model of disability, which actually looks at the illness and the person, what's wrong with them, and that's actually what's its term, you know. So we don't look at what is wrong with somebody, we look at how we can help people, how we can break down barriers, because barriers aren't necessarily physical, they're social, they're sort of attitudinal as well. So and we've got a lovely little video, if Grace can show it, that actually tries to explain why we do the work we do, and it's a non-verbal as well, which is brilliant.
Did you want the audio described version one, Liz, or do you want the standard one?
I think the audio one is good, just to show that if you're sort of sharing this with anybody, this is a really good way of looking at it.
Okay, one moment. I'm sorry, there's going to be an advert first, and then I'll share it.
Just to say, a lot of this is online. We've gone around and found it. This isn't all created by us, but it's not, if we don't know, we know a man who can, sort of thing. So we've just pulled it all together.
Removing Barriers, an animated film. A person in a wheelchair arrives at a big library building and looks up at the entrance. They see someone walking up the stairs and make a sad face. This image of the sad person crumbles up into a ball and reveals a brighter version of the same scenario. The library managers are standing at the window. They see that the person in the wheelchair can't get inside, and they have a conversation. They talk to some builders who begin to construct a ramp. The person in the wheelchair goes into the library using the new ramp. The person comes out from the library holding books and smiling happily. A new scenario shows a person sitting on a couch in their living room watching a comedy show on TV. The person walks over to the TV set and turns up the volume. They frown and look away disappointed. The image of the disappointed person crumples up and reveals a brighter version of the same scene. A sign language interpreter appears in the bottom corner of the TV screen. The person smiles and laughs at the TV programme. A new scenario shows people working in an office typing at computers. One of the office workers is tired and falls asleep at their desk. The office manager frowns and nudges the office worker, pointing at the clock. The other co-workers whisper and snigger. The image of the tired worker crumples up and reveals a brighter version of the same scene. The office manager talks to the tired office worker and points towards another room. The office worker lies down on the sofa and has a rest. The office worker returns to their desk with a smile. The co-workers and office manager smile. Unlimited. Telephone number 02074247330. Ship. Telephone number 02072475102. Arts.
So that's just a very basic film, but it actually covers everything. It covers people's attitudes, the physical barriers, it covers about creating chill out spaces and making sure that some people again will possibly have a disability that is not recognized. It could be a pain, it could be chronic, they could be suffering from chronic pain, depression, various other disabilities that are hidden. And the whole idea is to make sure that you can find different ways to create better working environments, better social environments for every individual. Grace, do you want to just, there's another thing that we're going to just talk very briefly about, and this is the spoon theory. This theory actually breaks it down into looking at people with pain and trying to understand what it's like for somebody who has sort of living with chronic pain. Are you all right, Grace, to do this?
Yeah, was there, did you want me to explain it? There's no video for spoon theory.
No, you were just going to explain it.
Yeah, no, so essentially it's a metaphor that basically explains how people living with chronic illness spend their energy. So to just kind of give a summary of it, if somebody with a chronic illness was to wake up with 10 spoons, literal spoons, that kind of represent energy, how many spoons would it take them to go out of the house, go to the cinema, cook their breakfast throughout the day? So for somebody who maybe doesn't have a chronic illness, they might wake up with 30 spoons. It will take 1 spoon to have breakfast, 1 spoon to get ready, 1 spoon to go out, and they're probably left with loads of spoons throughout the day. They've got lots of energy left. But for someone living with a chronic illness, it might take them 3 spoons to just merely get out of bed, 5 spoons to have breakfast, and then they're kind of left with 2 spoons. They need to then basically prioritise what's most important. Do they go out to the cinema like they really wanted to, or do they have to do their washing that day? And it's basically about saving your spoons and saving your energy and the decisions that you have to make when living with a chronic illness. It's really interesting, and I recommend you having a Google of it at some point, but of course it will be in this pack as well.
Thank you. And it's just a way of sort of looking at other disabilities as well, and we're really conscious that people should be looking at those. We'll also talk about accessible recruitment, and there's going to be quite a large part about this. One of the things, and Richard might want to chip in at this stage, is about not just where you advertise, but how do you advertise, and how do people reply, and what processes do you consider when you're looking at your advertising methods. It's lots of different ways of recruiting people, and then obviously the interview side of it as well. Richard, you've got thoughts on this?
No, I mean, well, the basic thought is very simple, which is that you have to go to people rather than expect people to come to you. And the usual ways of advertising or recruiting sometimes or most times are not appropriate, because they're, for want of a better expression, very neurotypical ways of just kind of going, oh, let's open our doors and somebody will want to come in. So the essential thing is, if you want to recruit different people, new people, you have to go out, literally out of your building to find them, and to be inventive about the way you find those people, rather than just kind of making sure that your adverts are accessible or whatever. So I'm just aware of time as well, so I don't want to talk too much in terms of that, but that will all be in the pack.
Yeah, and we've got sort of other links as well to actually sort of government links to sort of, it says how to sign up for the Employer Disability Confidence Scheme. So you can sign up to sort of ensure that your organisation has actually going through the right sort of steps. We then, so that's moving on. And then we're looking at working environments as well, and working experiences, working environments, looking at doing venue access, links to include access audits from organisations, for example, Access Able and the Ewins Guide. But we also have got examples, a lot of templates as well are in this as well, so you can fill your own in with examples, how to create your own access audit in your own venue. And the other one is looking at access statements and making sure that your organisation has created an access statement. We'll be giving sort of ideas of how your organisation can create them if they haven't already got them, or updating access statements as well. A lot of organisations may have created them a while ago, but things have changed, and it's important for people to sort of go back and look at those again. We'll be looking at how to create sensory maps, because everybody these days are looking at sensory maps. Where are the busiest places, the quiet places, and the times that this will be happening. We also looking at seeing again, it was in the video, looking at quiet spaces, how to create quiet spaces. There's an architect in who I met not long ago, and part of her role is actually to create accessible areas in new venues and new buildings. So that's actually being built into it. So looking at the lighting and how to create those. So those sort of contacts will be in there as well. We're looking at creating access packs that people will be given when they are when they come to you. So we'll give an example of what should be included in an access pack. We talk about access riders. Now, I always have a problem with this because a rider to me is somebody who says, can I have 50 blue M&Ms? But it's actually changed now. And I'm going to pass this to Grace because this is Grace's, she's leading us on this one. Do you want to just...
Yeah, so an access rider, it is a very inaccessible name. I know I've worked with a few people on access riders and they have said, well, where's the horse? And I completely get that. So kind of the new thing with access riders is that you can call them whatever you like and whatever makes sense to you. They are essentially a communication tool that share one person's access requirements from one person to the other. They basically help people know how best to work together and how to support each other. So they generally have a little bit of an instruction about the person, a little bit about maybe their disabilities if they wish to disclose that, but then it might explore things like how can you best be supported if you're working online or if you're travelling to a new space. And they also include things such as an escalation plan, which is basically if your condition was to deteriorate, how can we support you? And also an emergency plan if that's relevant as well. But essentially they can be called a manual of me, they can be called whatever you like. A rider is in an inaccessible. And apparently the TV industry have already established that it's a very inaccessible term and they've banned the word access rider. And they call them access passport. Just seem a little bit clearer to me. Yes, and you'll see templates in the opening up access pack as well.
Yeah, so but they are a very important part of actually making somebody's working environment sort of as you know, as accessible as possible, really. And they are evolving documents because again people may feel that they want to change, so once it's written it can be changed as well. So we also look at communication and documentation, which is obviously really important. There's the basic side of the BSL, audio described and captioning side of it, if you're creating any marketing materials and the best ways to go about that. But we're looking at things like sonic stories, which is about if you're going, for example, to a music venue and you want to just check the levels of sound. It's a really good one to be able to sort of put that in for your audiences, but also equally for members of staff who maybe volunteer working for you, found too hard, and they need to reduce the sound or they need to be prepared for it in advance. We look at creating easy read guides, large print, large print documents. Also, the other thing we're looking at is we're working with Widget Company, looking at symbols. We work with Makaton, but for the signing, but the widget symbols are very easy to use and they are sounds. You can speak to it and the symbol will come up. So if you're dealing with somebody who even as English as a second language, or even if you are trying to who actually don't understand quite the word you're saying, the symbols are really useful. We've got licenses that we've been sharing with our access champions for a year so they can get used to using them in their venues. The idea being that eventually all venues, heritage venues, will become symbol friendly, so there will be more pictures than words. We also will look at all the sort of digital material, the alternative text, social media, etc. So this will all be part of it as well. I'm whizzing on. I hope this is okay. Budgets, we're looking at budgets and how to budget for access, what obviously the best percentage of your money should be spent on. Obviously, people say 20% of your budget should be spent on access, which we totally agree with. We will be giving sort of other sort of information about access to work as well, and how to sort of look at that, how to apply for that if somebody actually needs assistance during who work for you and they need an assistant, and how they can apply for access to work, and we will be giving information about that. We look at language, and again, that's ever changing. We work with a brilliant a guest speaker came, and she has given us lots of information about the use of language and words, but it does change, and we all get sort of bogged down sometimes in a sort of a mire of what is meant to be used. But hopefully we will put, every time it changes and different ideas, we will put different things about the language there. Lots of other external resources and further learning as well. We're also looking for further contacts, useful contacts that you might need, like signers, audio describers, captioners, live captioners, various different people. I work with lots of different people during the Coventry City of Culture. We actually created a database. We thought it'd be quite useful to have an ongoing database with people who you may need to be in touch with as well. I've whizzed through it. There's lots on there. Is that okay? Is there anything Richard or Grace want to say before I hand over to Richard to talk about our key learning?
Just a couple of things to say before we kind of open it up for discussion as well. Obviously, this project that we've worked on was about volunteers, but it was obvious almost from the start that access is access is access. It doesn't matter which part of the organisation we're talking about that you work in, the same sort of things apply. So ultimately, it wasn't about access for volunteers, it was just about access broadly. We've talked about the fact that there's a lot of resources out there already, and we're not trying to say what we've created is the be all and end all. I think what we've tried to do is to open up the fact that access is so multifaceted that no one person or no one organization can get everything right. So let's look at everything as possible in that multifaceted way. So there are many other things to draw on as well. I think the other thing that gets forgotten a lot about this work is that it's seen as something we ought to do rather than something we get excited and creative about doing. And that's what we want to embed in this, is that access is about going on a journey. It's an exciting, adventurous journey, and we can all be part of a creative process of creating far better access in all sorts of ways. And lastly, I think one of the biggest puzzles is the bigger the organization, the harder it is to embed access within that organization. So that the sense of the lone voice in an organization, as opposed to an organization totally embracing access, so that everybody sees it as their responsibility in the organization to look at access. It's not about having an access officer and then going, oh, that's your job, get on and do it. How does it become embedded? So we've actually, in this these key learnings, we've mentioned quite a lot of these things already. A couple of things to highlight: everything does and should take a long time. There are no easy, quick fixes. Even in that example of the social model of disability, if you create a ramp and the person in the wheelchair can get in your building, it doesn't change the attitude of the people in the building to that person. So it's not simple. Let's build a ramp and then the people come in. It's about how do we change perceptions and the way people engage with each other. So it's an ongoing, long-term process. And just scrolling down again. Yes, ruthless is an interesting word for us. because I think sometimes we con ourselves that we've done something well and actually it's not working, but let's be honest about it. We tried, it failed. Why did it fail? What can we learn from that? How do we move on so it becomes better? And to be totally honest about what's going on and not kind of do that tick box exercise. And lastly, I think working with people with lived experience is so, so important. You cannot do this work on your own. It has to be in partnership with people who have the experience that they can bring to it. Yeah, so there is a list there. I don't think it, even as I'm looking at it, it's an exhaustive list. So that we can add to those key learnings as we go on as well.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Grace. Absolutely fantastic. Now, I know we were going to try and open up a bit of a discussion, but has anybody got any questions to start off with? Just any kind of, specific questions for the team. It just means you've done an excellent job of explaining everything.
I've got a question. Oh, sorry.
Well, there you go. Brian has got a question first,
Yeah.
Richard.
Yeah.
I wanted to raise my virtual hand, and I thought I'm just going to raise my hand. Yeah, what an amazing amount of work. Like, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I guess I was just wondering about, you might be coming on to this, but next steps in terms of, sharing this and how we around the screen can kind of really help to promote and support those messages and obviously embed them in our own organisations.
Do you want to answer that, Erica, or shall I?
We could do it jointly. Shall I start? So,
okay.
I think the kind of this program is sort of slowly come to an end. But actually, Richard and Liz and I were speaking just last week to talk about the legacy of it and what's been the value of this program. So the resources themselves will be up on our websites about the end of July when they're all finished. We've got a few other videos as well that have come out of the program to support it. So that will all form that, and we'll launch it properly towards the end of the month. But I think what we really want to do is, I think the value has come, as Richard and Liz and Grace have said, through the partnerships and through the conversations around how you actually embed these practices in reality, and how you learn from each other who's doing something really good. So I think we're looking at how we convene a group around this of people who are interested and who want to carry on these conversations, and that would be a bit of a partnership, I think, is what we're seeing. So Richard, add to that if anything you think of that.
Yeah, what was the most valuable thing about the whole experience was the group of people we got together called Access Champions, and the willingness to engage in those open, frank, honest, ruthless discussions together and learn from each other, and also share what people have been doing, because I think this was highlighted a little bit in the gathering that Culture Centre organised at the Transport Museum. Collaboration across arts organisations does not happen as often as it should do for all sorts of reasons. And the more we can collaborate over this, all of this area of access, the more effective it will be. So if you have, there's a particular example in Stourbridge of working with the Glass Museum and involving people who are deaf as volunteers. Incredible amount of learning going on there. How do we share that so that other people can do that as well? It's not, oh, isn't the Glass Museum great because they did it? Let's share that learning. Let's get that out there. So if you've got some experience that really works, share it. How do we share that? Yeah, it's really important.
Got Jackie?
I can't find my electronic hand, sorry. It seems to have gone through my reactions. But yeah, I just wanted to support that point about how it's the dialogue between each other and with the groups that we're working with, and what other is there a way that more of the in-person opportunities to come together around access, and particularly the brilliant resource that you've created, and thank you so much. It just looks absolutely fabulous. But, you know, say 6 months in or 3 months in from its launch, is there a convening around how the membership are utilising that and bringing representative groups along for us, you know, to explore that together? I don't know, it just feels like it's such a rich resource, and it will be how we continue to activate it in our dialogue, and is there a way that the members could be doing that?
Richard, do you want to respond or me? I think
you better than me, because
no, I think that's a really key point, and I think that's the conversations we're having with Richard about what does that space look like in terms of bringing people together to do that learning. I mean, the Access Champions met every month, didn't they? And it was shaped as each month kind of went on based on what they were learning. So, but quite specific and in depth. So I think you did training, didn't you, on some quite specific areas?
Yeah, so we had different speakers come in at different times to share different kinds of experiences. Sorry, I was stumbling a bit because I was thinking, how does Culture Central itself, as a networking organisation, how can we work within that structure? And I'm not sure. Maybe we should have that conversation a bit more about how to do that. I think, and I'm going to say this advisedly, but I think we have to look at how we can use Culture Central to embed across a large organisation rather than just relying on people like yourselves who are keen. And that, I think, is one of the dangers, that we get the keen people involved, but we're not kind of embedding it enough. And I say this so many times, if we look at the makeup of the people in this room, in this virtual space, it's mostly women. And why is it not seen as something that men get involved in? Because this happens so many times. Most of the Access champions were female. And I do think that's a bit of an issue. I personally encounter that in so many situations where I think I'm the only guy talking about this. Why is this? So where does this sit within an organisation? Who are making those decisions and so on? I think is really important for us to really grapple with a bit more.
We've had that conversation, haven't we? Again, I think a lot of people who are keen in Access and kind of come along to a lot of the spaces are people who have either a closer alliance or a closer experience to it, or it forms part of it. So it's about how do we find those people in organisations that are able to do that embedding of it at all levels as well. And that's at all scales, actually, to be fair, as well, isn't it? So it's a very easy mix. So yeah, I agree with you. Anybody else got any other questions?
Can I just say one thing? One of the things that we've done since then, since having the meetings, is we've actually been going into other venues as well. So the people who were there, who attended, have asked us to go into to carry on the work that we've been doing with them, to work with their volunteers, their staff. We're working with Black Country Living Museum. We're working with Wolverhampton Art Gallery. Working with the film. I can't remember what their title is. Based in Birmingham film people. We've worked with Whittick Manor. We're sort of looking at a different organisations. So we're going out to the venues who we've sort of been working with the Access who are championing their sort of who are the Access champions for these organisations, which has been great. So we're sort of carrying it on. So the legacy isn't stopping, but we, again, what Richard was saying, it's and Erica, is that how can we spread this out? And Jackie, I mean, this conversation started when I can remember when I was at Birmingham Hippodrome. We worked with the National, the RSC, and I think it was because of Tessitura, but we had an Access an Access group. Oh, and the rep were there as well, and so we had there were big names, but but it was about sharing ideas, sharing and looking, and sharing resources. I'm quite keen and looking at the whole idea about and physical resources. You know, we were sharing captioning boards in those days, but there might be other things, and we were talking about the equitable side of being an organization. People, you know, an organization can afford huge things, but perhaps they could share some of that, you know, physical equipment with a smaller organization and help, you know, and help expand access to everyone. It shouldn't just be, you know, we do this in this very large organization because we can afford it, but money shouldn't be the barrier to it as well. And that's I'm really passionate about that, about sharing physical as well as other ideas, physical equipment. Sorry, blaring on.
No, thanks, Liz. It's a really interesting discussion. So anybody else got any questions or anything in terms of just to contribute to that conversation, really? Around a group, a kind of a practice sharing, what sort of form it might want to take, what the engagement might, who would we want in it, in that space? Oh, everyone's gone very quiet now. Yes. Oh, Jackie, I've got there.
Still can't find me other hand, but
I like a real hand.
Well, just picking up what Liz was saying, I mean, I wonder if there's a first meeting where we could share, but like the organisations share what are the current resources that we are using, for example, in terms of captioning, and then start that look at how can those resources get shared? Where are they useful for other people? That's a kind of practical starting point.
Yeah.
Karen, you're nodding your head there at BCU.
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, a lot of the academic events that we run, access is still a little bit of an afterthought or a last minute thing. I did an event last year and I couldn't find interpreters. We didn't have any registered on our system. We didn't have a list. I was asking around. And it's just things like that that make it really difficult to make events accessible. So some way of sharing lists of access, provide access, interpreters, signers and so on, and the resource here as well. It's all really useful.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying in that particular instance that interpreters are few and hard to find because they're so there's so much demand. We worked with Deaf Explorer when Rachel Vasey was there, and Rachel is always saying, I'm booked so far in advance, it's so difficult to, and she tries to find interpreters as much as possible. So that's one particular thing. I think in reference to the access as an afterthought, if you think access right at the beginning, you might actually create a more exciting, inventive, wonderful event for everyone, not just for the people who need the access. So I think it's kind of turning things on their heads a bit and going, let's start thinking from access about how that can influence everything we do, rather than this is what we want to do and how can we just open our doors a little bit wider so that a few more people can come in and be part of it. And it's that way of thinking, and that's kind of possibly a bit pie in the sky, but certainly if you start from thinking like that, and the other example of that is relaxed performances, which we joke about now. Relaxed performances are basically a segregated audience. They're saying, if you've got a particular need, then come on this day only. If we called every performance that wasn't relaxed an uptight performance, and if you want to come to an uptight performance, this is the day you come, otherwise everything is relaxed. Do you see what I mean? It's just a different way of thinking about how to solve some of these problems, and turning things on their head a bit.
I still love that. Love that. Your performance being a relaxed.
Yeah.
If you want to come something quiet, then you go on that day.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, traditionally theatre was a very exciting, noisy, boisterous place where even the audience got up on the stage and interacted with the actors. So we have certain restrictions about the way we think about performance that are not set in stone. They're just how we like it at the moment. So let's rethink things.
Important. Naomi.
I know I'm not like one of the members, so I wasn't sure if I was meant to like throw something in, but I just felt like, when in the earlier part, when it was being mentioned about lived experience, obviously, different people's audiences and participants are not going to just be going to one place. So I was just thinking about if there was any kind of opportunities for like kind of pooling resources in terms of lived experience and opening up forums potentially, or even if it's just sharing what kind of like feedback is already collected, but just opening up forums potentially for people who do have certain access needs to kind of be sharing what kind of issues they come up against or solutions that they'd like to see, in such a way that that membership or our networks can think collaboratively about that. I think that would probably be more, what's the right word? I think that like things could be, if things were more joined up in that way, then the progress and the action that kind of gets taken from that feedback would probably be a bit quicker or more robust potentially, than just everyone trying to sort of like duplicate what they're hearing.
Thanks, Naomi. Yeah, and Charlene, you had your hand up. I'm assuming you were going to jump in on inclusive.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a plug for the inclusive networks, really, but I think that could be a mechanism for something like that, Naomi, that we could pull together some of the people that have got that lived experience and use them as a resource to the sector, actually, and people can tap into some of that knowledge and they can be part of the conversation and part of the consultation process. So I think that could be an opportunity there, amongst other ways. Anybody else has any suggestions?
Charlene, I don't know if you want to just quickly touch on what you've been like, because you've got an inclusive network session today, but just the vision for that a little bit.
Yeah, the vision for the inclusive networks is really about like allowing people from the sector who are traditionally excluded to come together and be part of a networking collaborative space. And part of that is, like some of the learnings that we've had from our previous programs. So our convene, challenge and connect program, where we had a lot of people. This is a little bit pre Commonwealth Games stuff around like looking at what the sector needs and like how can we be more inclusive, how can we be how can we develop the sector and freelancers and the creative workforce. And then moving on from that, we kind of pushed it into some of the work that we was doing with Legacy, around building on that more than the moment and extending the kind of network for it to be including other identities as well, other traditionally excluded identities. And we're going to be kind of pushing that forward, doing more kind of work in terms of knowledge sharing, development of those creatives, and just basically making it a bit more of a network, a bigger network where we can be allies to each other. And also, again, just mentioning the network being a resource to the sector, the network will be a resource to Culture Central, like where we're going to be working in terms of doing the Charter for Equity, which came out through the summit, and also like any other activities. So this is a perfect example of where we could tap into some of the groups within the networks to, kind of look at how we can improve our practice, basically. So yeah, we're having a briefing session today. So if you haven't signed up, you can join in for that. And we have a couple of activities and events coming up soon as well for the networks, because you know what networks equals, you know, capital, like, you know, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And if you bring people together, you know, it can produce amazing things. So yeah, that's what we're up to at the moment.
Thanks, Charlene. I think it's just helpful, and actually anybody who would wanting to signpost somebody traditionally excluded, so you know, with disabilities to that inclusive network, Charlene is still trying to get as many people as possible that is representative across the sector. Or not representative across the sector. That's the whole point, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not just open to just freelancers, it's open to people who work for organizations. So there's a couple of people in the room already that I think could potentially, you know, join as part of the network, just to, you know, give some ideas around like good practice. So like I'm looking at Grace potentially, you know, in terms of like what you can share, like the work that you've been doing would be amazing. So yeah.
Fabulous. Right, I've got 3 minutes left, so anything else, or shall I try and sum up a little bit? Okay, so we will launch the resource pack and other bits and bobs at the end of July. If we give ourselves a deadline, we're going to have to do it. So keep an eye out in your newsletter. On for members, it'll be a little bit sooner. And Richard and I will carry on that conversation and make sure we've got a convening point at that time. So we'll agree a date that comes out in July to be able to have something probably, obviously not over the summer, but as we start the new academic year. When it's going to be busy anyway. But yeah, we'll bring everyone together for those who are interested. The resource will be up on our website by that point. So yeah, that'd be great. I think that's it, isn't it, for next steps? And if anybody's got any questions or anything in the meantime, if you want to direct them to me, I can always forward your information to Richard. Well, if you send it to somebody in the Culture Central team, then we can pass that on to Richard and the team. But I just want to also say a huge thank you to Richard, Liz and Grace and all of the Access champions and people for committing to that work and being so generous and open and collecting all of this resources for us. It's really been an important piece of work. So thank you.